Do you know who Japanese and Korean gangsters hate the most? Alibaba.
알리바바인지 뭐시긴지 그 지구조직 그 것들이 다 조져불고.
The smuggling business they depended on for survival was completely wiped out by Ma Dong-suk. Now the gang boss is buried in debt, and even a temporary worker on the street dares to order him around. This is South Korea's latest unconventional gangster comedy, Boss. But before we begin, here is a friendly warning. This movie will completely shatter every stereotype you have about gangster films. Without further delay, let's get into the story. The main character is named Soon-tae, the most famous chef for miles around. But what made him famous was never his exceptional cooking skills. It was the restaurant packed wall to wall with customers who were all members of the same gang. At the same time, he was also one of the gang's most important members, and whenever a call came in, he would immediately bring his most capable brother, Kang-pyo, to the scene. After all, another brother in the gang, Pan-ho, was constantly causing trouble, making it almost impossible for Soon-tae to stay out of it. Fortunately, the two men were already highly skilled fighters, and with the perfect teamwork they had developed over the years, they could easily handle even the biggest mess. Their boss was naturally pleased to see this. After all, without Pan-ho constantly stirring up trouble, he would have no excuse to take over more territory. Now that the three men had once again achieved something impressive, the boss poured drinks for his three men while also taking the opportunity to teach them a lesson, and the impulsive, troublemaking Pan-ho naturally became the perfect example. The boss even promised in front of everyone that one day, he would choose the next gang leader from among the three of them. Hearing this, Pan-ho and Kang-pyo were greatly encouraged. But Soon-tae's response was completely different.
전 짱깨요. 짱꼬이, 짱깨. 중국 본토에서는 한자로 가게 주인장, 보스라는 뜻입니다.
With the three fierce fighters charging forward, casinos, docks, and every other valuable territory were soon brought under the boss's control. Several years passed in the blink of an eye, and the boss officially took control of one of the city's landmark buildings. While their gang became the largest criminal organization in the entire city, the scene shifts to 10 years later, when Soon-tae's restaurant has grown considerably, and he has also married a gentle and beautiful wife. Today, the restaurant is welcoming a group of extremely important guests, field inspectors from Angel Ventures, to transform his small restaurant into a nationwide chain. Soon-tae visited major investment firms across the country before finally earning this valuable inspection opportunity. Whether it was selecting ingredients or personally preparing every dish, he handled everything himself, determined to create the most perfect meal possible. His hard work soon paid off, as one beautiful dish after another was placed on the table, but the inspector's expressions became increasingly strange. Fortunately, the food tasted exceptional, so the small flaws in presentation no longer seemed important. But when the inspectors asked about the secret recipes behind the dishes, Soon-tae honestly revealed everything without holding anything back.
춘장 같은 건 한 공장에서 받아서 쓰거든요.
Watching everyone devour the food, Soon-tae believed the investment was practically guaranteed. But just then, the restaurant doors suddenly swung open.
형님, 배식 끝났습니까?
The gang members showed up for a meal right at lunchtime. Their perfectly synchronized shout of "boss" immediately made the inspectors extremely uncomfortable, and after inventing a random excuse, they hurriedly fled the restaurant. The incident left Soon-tae's wife deeply frustrated, and once again, she urged her husband to leave the gang completely. But Soon-tae could never forget everything the boss had done for him. The restaurant had been funded by the boss, and the boss had even introduced him to his wife years earlier. The moment he mentioned the past, his wife became even more furious. Back then, the boss had tricked her into going to a nightclub, and while she was confused from drinking, she somehow ended up together with Soon-tae. Soon-tae was about to defend himself when their daughter returned home from school. As his daughter walked over to collect payment from the gang members for their meals, a deep sense of worry flashed across Soon-tae's eyes. The following day, while taking his daughter to school, he could not resist asking why she never spent time with her classmates. His daughter calmly gave him an answer.
아빠가 조폭이니까.
Her answer caught Soon-tae completely off guard.
누가 해도 조폭 무서워해? 같이 다니면 쪽팔리니까 그렇지.
After dropping her off, he casually called out his daughter's name. The students around her immediately scattered and deliberately moved away. At that moment, Soon-tae finally made up his mind to leave the gang for good. Meanwhile, the once powerful gang boss now had a completely broken cash flow and was forced to personally visit a bank to apply for a loan. Even more astonishingly, although the bank employee knew perfectly well that he was the biggest gang leader in the area, she still made things difficult for him and repeatedly refused to help. Overcome with anger, the boss was about to become violent when Soon-tae arrived just in time to stop him, preventing a major disaster. That evening, the boss poured out all his frustrations to Soon-tae. His underground lending business had been destroyed by online loan services. Protection payments had been replaced by official taxes and fees. And even the smuggling routes they depended on had been taken over by rival organizations. Seeing the boss looking so helpless and defeated, Soon-tae felt deeply sorry for him. But when he thought about his daughter's future, he still carefully handed over a handwritten letter announcing his retirement. The moment the boss saw the letter, his expression immediately darkened. Everyone in their world knew that joining a gang was easy, but leaving one was almost impossible, and Soon-tae understood that rule as well. But just as he prepared to accept whatever punishment the gang's rules demanded, the boss suddenly stood up.
야야야야야야야야 너 시방 뭐하냐? 어? 미미 앞에서 에팔로 요리하고 잡냐?
아빠가 조폭인 것보다 그게 훨씬 낫습니다.
노란 게 위험해. 아!
After so many years of brotherhood, the boss knew that Soon-tae had a wife, a daughter, and a stable, promising future, so he refused to stand in his way. Before Soon-tae left, the boss gave him the only valuable item he still owned, a dagger that could one day serve as a wedding gift for Soon-tae's daughter, Mimi. By this point, everyone can probably guess that something is about to happen to the boss. Sure enough, while Soon-tae was sharing the good news of his successful retirement with his wife, an urgent call suddenly came from one of the gang members. By the time Soon-tae rushed to the scene, it was already too late, and the boss's body had been sent away for examination. Kim In-sul, the gang's second-in-command, told everyone that the police had initially ruled the death a suicide. Soon-tae also accepted the conclusion, because earlier that day, he had personally witnessed how desperate and trapped the boss had become. Just as everyone was preparing to accept reality and give their boss a proper farewell, a group of unexpected visitors suddenly arrived, and they were all creditors demanding repayment, with several different groups among them. Pan-ho immediately became furious and prepared to fight, but then he heard even worse news. The loans had been taken out under a company owned by the gang, and if the next legal representative, meaning the new gang leader, failed to repay the debt on time, every vehicle and property owned by the company would be seized by the court. That evening, the gang's senior members gathered to discuss choosing a new leader. The rightful successor, Kang-pyo, was still serving time in prison, while Pan-ho was reckless and impulsive, and if the gang were placed in his hands, it would completely collapse before long. After considering every possibility, only Soon-tae remained as the most suitable choice. He never fought for power. He was both brave and intelligent, and the senior members were confident they could keep him under control. Just as the senior members were preparing to hand this unbearable responsibility to Soon-tae, he was facing one of the most important decisions of his life: signing an investment agreement to turn his restaurant into a chain. The contract clearly stated that if the second party committed any action that damaged the company's reputation, they would be required to pay 5 times the original amount as a penalty. In other words, if Soon-tae's former gang identity was exposed, the enormous penalty would instantly bury him in debt. But believing that he had already submitted his retirement letter, Soon-tae eventually signed his name. Soon-tae and his wife assumed the senior members had come to congratulate them on successfully signing the agreement, but Kim In-sul brought terrible news instead.
네가 자기 보스다.
Soon-tae pulled out his retirement letter and tried to refuse, but the senior members insisted that because the former boss had never publicly announced his retirement, the letter was invalid. Fortunately, there was one person present who strongly opposed Soon-tae becoming the new leader, and that person was Pan-ho. Soon-tae reacted as though he had found a lifeline and enthusiastically recommended Pan-ho as the next boss, but every senior member immediately rejected the idea.
아이 안 된다.
With no other choice, Soon-tae proposed holding a fair election and allowing every member of the gang to vote publicly, but he never expected that the meals he had provided over the years had earned such deep loyalty. And when the votes were counted, Soon-tae won by an overwhelming majority. Just as Soon-tae was sinking into complete despair, a woman's voice suddenly rang out.
잠깐!
This woman was Kang-pyo's biological mother. She had come to secure an opportunity for her son, who had already qualified for parole, and all they needed to do was honor the promise made years ago. At the time, a corrupt police officer had been extorting the gang for years, so the boss ordered Soon-tae to deal with the problem once and for all, publicly promising that he would become the next gang leader. But just as Soon-tae was preparing to carry out the assignment, Kang-pyo stepped in without permission and completed it first. As the legitimate successor, he wanted the position of boss more than anyone else. Now that Kang-pyo had been released on parole, another wave of conflict was certain to shake the gang. Sure enough, the moment Kang-pyo stepped onto the stage, he delivered a passionate and emotional speech, declaring that he would carry on the former boss's wishes, make sure every brother had a stable way to earn a living, keep everyone fed and clothed, and lead the gang back onto its feet.
순태 형 했으면 좋겠는데.
왜 저러는겨?
Everyone was completely confused, because Kang-pyo had always been obsessed with becoming the boss. Yet now that the position was within reach, he was voluntarily stepping aside. It turned out that during his time in prison, he had accidentally watched a charity dance performance, and the moment the dancers began moving across the stage, his heart started pounding uncontrollably. At that moment, he finally realized that his true calling had never been the violent world of organized crime, but the dance being performed on that stage. Even more surprisingly, the reason Kang-pyo had applied for parole was to attend an entrance examination for a school specializing in dance. But because Soon-tae was desperate to escape the position of gang leader, he arranged for a large group of men to chase and block Kang-pyo on the day of the examination, deliberately making him miss it. Looking at Soon-tae on the stage after his plan had succeeded, Kang-pyo's eyes instantly turned cold. At the same time, a delivery of black bean noodles arrived in the hands of the police captain. But after delivering the food, the delivery man did not immediately leave, and instead reported to his superior that neither Soon-tae nor Kang-pyo was willing to take over as gang leader. This delivery man was actually an undercover police officer who had been planted inside Soon-tae's restaurant for many years. But over the course of an entire decade, every supposed clue about illegal drug transactions he had collected turned out to involve nothing more than salted fish, vegetables, and other ordinary goods. The detective was extremely dissatisfied with the undercover officer and sternly warned him that he had to use this leadership transition to obtain concrete evidence of Soon-tae committing a crime, because if the special investigation team was disbanded, he would never be able to regain his official identity as a police officer. Meanwhile, two unusual customers arrived at Soon-tae's restaurant, dressed in full hiking equipment even though there was not a trace of mud on their shoes, asking to order fried dumplings while refusing the free side dishes. And with the brand tags still attached to the woman's expensive clothing, Soon-tae and his wife immediately realized that the pair were undercover inspectors from Angel Ventures. The couple quickly began treating them with extraordinary care, closely watching their reactions to every dish. After the two finished eating, Soon-tae thoughtfully approached them and asked for their opinion of the food. The man had barely raised his thumb to give a positive review when both of them suddenly collapsed stiffly onto the floor. Food poisoning, the greatest fear of anyone in the restaurant business, had happened inside Soon-tae's own establishment. Every dish had been personally prepared by Soon-tae, so how could something like this have happened? At that moment, a kitchen assistant brought out a piece of pork belly covered in a layer of white powder, which turned out to be rat poison. Soon-tae instantly exploded with anger. At that exact moment, the serving bell rang outside, and Kang-pyo arrived without being invited.
이제 먹는 걸로 장난쳐?
It was obvious that Kang-pyo was taking revenge on Soon-tae for making him miss the dance examination. Kang-pyo's actions had crossed the line, so Soon-tae invited the gang's senior members to settle the dispute and publicly challenged Kang-pyo to one final duel, with the loser being forced to become the next gang leader. On the surface, all four senior members expressed their support for the duel, but later that night, Kim In-sul secretly met with Pan-ho and admitted that Pan-ho had always been his preferred candidate for gang leader, but because all the other senior members supported Soon-tae, He had been forced to remain patient and pretend to agree. If both Soon-tae and Kang-pyo were eliminated during the duel, Pan-ho would become the only remaining candidate for the leadership position. The scene shifts as the duel officially begins. At first, the two men exchange attacks evenly, with neither gaining the upper hand. Kim In-sul secretly gives Pan-ho a signal, and Pan-ho immediately charges into the fighting area. The senior members try to step forward and stop him, but Kim In-sul blocks their path. Seeing this, Soon-tae picks up the dagger from the ground and drives it into Kang-pyo's stomach, causing blood to burst out instantly. Just as Pan-ho draws his weapon and prepares to settle the conflict between them, Kang-pyo suddenly leaps up from the ground, grabs Soon-tae, and jumps into the ocean with him. News of the incident soon spreads across the entire city. Two successors to the gang fought over the leadership position at the docks the previous night. Both fell into the sea, and neither had been found. Just as Pan-ho believes the position of boss is finally his and prepares to enjoy his new authority, the undercover delivery man pulls open a curtain leading to the basement. Soon-tae and Kang-pyo are sitting inside, eating and drinking peacefully without a single injury. It turns out that Soon-tae and Kang-pyo had secretly planned everything in advance, copying a common movie trick by wrapping thick pigskin around their bodies and attaching a bag of pig's blood outside. They could create the illusion of being stabbed and bleeding. The two had originally planned to escape together after the duel, but when Pan-ho suddenly charged into the fight, they had no choice but to pretend they were both going down together and escape by jumping into the sea. Even more unexpectedly, late that night, Pan-ho and Kim In-sul arrived at the restaurant with a group of creditors, and the three men hid upstairs outside the door, where they overheard a shocking truth.
내 말 오해하지 말고 잘 들어. 나 따라갈래.
The former boss had never taken his own life, because he firmly refused to lead the gang into the drug trade, a path from which there would be no return. Kim In-sul joined forces with the creditors and arranged the boss's death.
어떻게 대시하면?
For a brief moment, Pan-ho considered avenging his boss, but the thought disappeared almost immediately. When he realized how much money the drug trade could bring, he ultimately chose silence and compromise. That was the greatest difference between him and Soon-tae and Kang-pyo. Kang-pyo immediately prepared to call the police, but the undercover officer stood up and stopped them, preparing to dramatically reveal his true identity as a police officer. Before he could even finish posing for his impressive entrance, Soon-tae spoke first and directly exposed his undercover identity. The officer froze in disbelief, convinced that his disguise had been flawless. But in Soon-tae's eyes, the clues had always been everywhere. The overly obvious investigation board inside his room, the photograph of him wearing a police uniform hanging on the wall, and the countless unconscious gestures that revealed his police training had made the truth clear to Soon-tae long ago. But the three men never expected that after years of useless information, the detective had completely lost patience with the undercover officer and refused to send a police team, no matter how many reports he submitted. With no other options left, the three created a new arrest plan. Fortunately, the undercover officer still had his professional skills, so he would enter the drug transaction alone while wearing a miniature camera on his chest, live streaming the entire deal to the detective and ensuring that every dealer was brought to justice. But the operation would also affect every low-ranking member of the gang, because anyone involved in the drug deal would be unable to escape legal punishment. The moment the undercover officer confirmed that the goods being traded were illegal drugs, Soon-tae and Kang-pyo smashed through the door and charged inside. As Soon-tae explained, every gang member at the scene had eaten at least one meal in his restaurant. He had spent 10 years making sure they had food every day, not so he could stand by and watch them become drug users.
니들 그렇게 착하진 않아도 막 후지 새끼는 아니잖아 임마. 안 그래?
그래. 우리 바르게는 아니어도 한번 제대로 살아봐야 되지 않겠냐?
His words left every gang member at the scene deeply ashamed. When Pan-ho ordered everyone to attack the two men, the gang members unexpectedly moved together and stood behind Soon-tae, instantly making the two sides evenly matched. And dealing with the drug dealer's followers became effortless. Realizing the situation had turned against them, Kim In-sul and his men tried to escape, but Soon-tae led the others forward to stop them, leaving only Pan-ho and Kang-pyo behind. Knowing that he could never defeat Kang-pyo alone, Pan-ho immediately threw away his weapon, poured out all his frustrations, cried uncontrollably, and pretended that he sincerely regretted everything. But as he slowly approached Kang-pyo and prepared to launch a surprise attack, Kang-pyo did not become unrealistically soft-hearted like characters in typical movies, and instead grabbed Pan-ho and began performing a ridiculous tango with him, bringing a comedic ending to what should have been a violent and deadly gang battle. By the time a large police force arrived at the scene, the conflict had already ended, because Soon-tae and every gang member who genuinely chose to change had helped the police uncover a major drug operation. The detective verbally promised to award them the title of honorary citizens. Before leaving, the detective asked the question that everyone had been wondering about.
이제 둘 중에 누가 보스야?
After hearing the question, Soon-tae and Kang-pyo looked at each other and smiled. Kang-pyo turned around first and ran toward the dance school he had always dreamed of attending, while Soon-tae casually threw away the gloves that symbolized his criminal identity and walked away smiling as the gang members shouted together, "Thank you for everything, boss." Clearly, the gang that had existed for so many years was finally dissolved. The story jumps forward 1 year, when a new undercover delivery man appears before the newly promoted detective and reports information about a rising gang's drug transactions. It seems as though nothing in the world has ever changed. In reality, there will always be people willing to risk everything for money, and there will always be people willing to do anything for power. But in an ordinary corner of the city, Soon-tae and his family are peacefully and happily running their restaurant, while Kang-pyo loses himself in a crowded dance floor and enjoys the passion he truly loves. Perhaps this is the unique happy ending that belongs to ordinary people. They have the ability and courage to reclaim their own time and passions from the overwhelming current of desire, while protecting the final piece of kindness within their hearts. And are we not also ordinary people working tirelessly just to make a living? See you next time.